Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Jenny and today we're going to be going through all the books that I read in February. There are a good few on the list this month and quite a few I don't actually have in my possession because I listened to them as an audiobook. So let's just get straight into it. The first book I read this month was Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This book was published on the 31st of January, so of course it had to be my first read of February. If you don't know, this book is part of like a standalone trilogy which follows three brothers. Each brother has their own book and their own love story. This book follows Callahan Cain, who is the middle child of the brothers. It's essentially a small town romance, a second chance romance. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that the first book in this sort of trilogy is The Fine Print, which I really didn't gel with, and I ended up rating it 2 stars. Whereas the second book in the trilogy, Terms and Conditions, I absolutely loved and I rated it 5 stars. You do meet Cal in the other 2 books, and particularly in Terms of Conditions, so I already knew that I absolutely loved him as a character. He's kind of like the less serious, jokesy brother, and he really just does not take life seriously, which can both be a good thing and a bad thing. And this book definitely explores both sides of that. For a lot of his life, Cal has actually been a very high-functioning alcoholic, which has basically affected everything in his entire life. From the first time he tried to have a relationship with Alana, who is the female love interest in this book, to his relationship with his brothers, to keeping work and finding out what his actual passion in life is after the injury he suffered from playing hockey when he was in his early 20s. There's so much more depth to this book than you may think originally, because part of the storyline is that Cal's grandfather has put in his will that he needs him to go to the Summer Lake house that he owned and sell it. What Cal doesn't realise until he gets there is Alana is actually living there with her daughter, and she claims that Brady signed over the house to her and that she actually owns it. In order to be able to gain his and his brother's $1 billion inheritance, he has to find a way to convince Alana to sell the house that she absolutely loves. So of course there's a lot of false proximity and just so much drama and tension, and definitely complicates things when it comes to Alana's daughter. As much as Cal and Alana actually really want to be together, there's the looming force of the fact that he is still drinking, he's not sober, and she has to look after a small child. So that combination was never going to work together. In the end, I ended up rating this book 5 stars because it was just so wonderfully written and the love story was so poignant, and you could just really see the depth of care and love these 2 characters had for each other straight away, like off the bat, because you know there's this history between them already. And then as they go through the book and all the challenges that they're faced with, it was fantastic. The next book that I read is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Last year I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry and I really loved that book. So of course I wanted to try out some other books that she'd written, and one of the most highly recommended books was Beach Read. Now, I rated Book Lovers 5 stars last year, but now I'm completely rethinking my reason for rating that 5 stars because Beach Read is so much better. This is an actual 5-star book. The book follows January and Gus, who are living next door to each other for the summer. They both have crippling writer's block, and they decide that they will swap genres and write a different kind of style book than they used to. January tends to write romance books, while Gus tends to write these darker type of books. And so ensues their friendship. They sort of go on like little mini quests together to sort of understand each other's genre more, and it's just such a wonderful read. And I keep comparing it to Book Lovers because I still can't believe that I decided to rate Book Lovers as a 5-star book when you compare it to Beach Read. As a love interest, Gus is so much more interesting than Charlie was from Book Lovers. I mean, when you compare them as love interests, Charlie now feels to me so wooden as a character. He didn't really have much to him, whereas when you read Gus's story and you hear more about his life, you just understand so much more why January is interested in him. It's a very cute story, cutesy romance, but there's also, you know, troubles and things that both of these characters have to go through themselves. They're dealing with their own stuff. And while when they're together, things are great between them, there's always outside forces that are just threatening to invade their sort of little summer. Overall, I rated this book 5 stars, if you couldn't guess already, and I highly recommend you check this one out. Next, I read The No-Show by Beth O'Leary. Last year, I read The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary, so again, I wanted to read more of her books, and The No-Show was coming out in paperback at the beginning of February, so I decided to jump straight onto that. The No-Show follows 3 women who have all been stood up by the very same man on Valentine's Day. Each one was supposed to meet him at a different time of the day, one for breakfast, one for lunch, and one for dinner that night. But something happened, he didn't turn up to any of them, and I wasn't quite sure how quick we were going to meet this guy, whether we were ever going to meet him. But by like the 3rd, 4th chapter, he was already introduced and he was grovelling, saying sorry to each woman in their point of view. So you hear the novel told through these 3 women's points of view. You never hear from Joseph until the very, very last chapter of the book. I didn't realise that until I actually got there. I thought we'd never hear from him, but you do. You get a little bit of insight into his mind. The reason that I was really intrigued by this book, because it's not your typical romance. Already you hate this character. He is dating 3 women at the same time, so you're already wondering how he can possibly get himself out of that situation, how he can possibly become a redeemable character, and whether any of them are even going to end up with him at the end of the book. That's the whole hook of the book, and Beth O'Leary did not disappoint. I was crying my eyes out by the end of this book, and I can't say too much more because I don't want to ruin it for anybody that hasn't read it, but just trust me when I say that the twist in this book is so worth it. Because it's written in 3 women's points of view, you are automatically rooting for every single character. You can understand why they have fallen for this man, and you want them all to succeed, but at the same time you don't want him to succeed, and it's just such an emotional roller coaster ride of a novel. The next book I read was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. So this book centres around a Chinese American family living in the 1970s. The novel begins with Marilyn and James realising that their daughter Lydia is missing, and within the first 100 pages-ish, they end up realising that she's actually been found dead. So from reading the back cover and hearing a little bit about people's opinions on TikTok, I thought this was going to be like a murder mystery book, which it really is not. It's not like that at all. This is a very family-oriented, character-driven novel. you get sucked into every single family member's sort of struggles over the years, and sort of at the beginning of the novel it flashes back a lot to when Marilyn and James first met, how they became a couple, started a family together, and sort of all the issues they faced and sort of the racial stereotypes and hate, you know, kind of judgment and hatred they received because it was a white woman and a Chinese man who ended up getting married. Maybe it's just because I came into this thinking it was going to be like a crime and mystery novel, but because of that I really didn't care. I wanted the focus to stay on the kids as, you know, as they were, the family in the here and now. Why did Lydia die? What happened to her? But so much of the novel doesn't even focus on the death. It's focusing on the family relationship between them, how all of the struggles that Marilyn and James faced before have made them make really bad parenting decisions and psychologically affect their children. And that was another thing, the way James treated his son and the way Marilyn treated Lydia, her daughter, and the way they both, and even the Lydia and Nath, how they treated the youngest, it was, honestly, it was horrible to read. And I think I would have felt a lot differently about this book if, when we got to the end, there was, I guess, not consequences, but it was talked about a little bit more. The way Celeste sort of wrote this book, it was kind of like everything that the parents had done to the children, how they'd psychologically damaged them, how even Nath was physically abused at some points in this book as well. Yeah, physically abused by his dad, was all just fine. And because they suddenly realised the error of their ways, that they're gonna, after this book, it's gonna go on and that they're gonna heal together as a family. And I was like, what the hell have I just read? Like, Lydia's death and everything that happened after that was just some sort of big wake-up call for this family, you know, like months after. And because of that, that just made me really not like this book, and the way it ended, the way it was portrayed, and the way these characters, the parents in particular, just got away with how horribly they treated their children. And I feel like that is just not talked enough about when people are reviewing this book. I'm like, do you even realise how really badly they psychologically damaged all three of their children and physically abused one of them? The writing was good, okay. Celeste really knows how to put sentences together. She really knows how to craft a story, and that is probably the only reason why it got 3 stars from me, because the way it was written was really good. I don't think this is going to stop me from reading some of her other books. I definitely want to see a couple of the others, like Our Missing Hearts, and I think it's Little Fires Everywhere, her 2 other novels. I want to know what they're about, because she is talented. She has a very great way of telling stories. I just think the moral compass of this book was completely off for me, and that's why I didn't like it. The next book I read was Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't have a physical copy of this book because it's not out in paperback yet, and I really dislike hardbacks, but I listened to it as an audiobook, and I don't know whether it's maybe because I listened to the audiobook of how immersive this story was, how much it dragged me in, is maybe part of my opinion of why I've rated it 5 stars. I would even go as far as to say that this is like a 6-star book for me, because it was just that good, and I have not cried that much at a book in quite a long time. I mean, I sometimes get a little teary, you know, it gets the emotions going, but this book, I was in floods of tears. I was heaving at how much this book destroyed me at points in the novel. For anyone that doesn't know what the story is about, Carrie Soto is Back is essentially a novel about a woman who has been retired from professional tennis for, I think it's about 7 years when the book starts. And she's at the final of this tennis match between two younger players, one of which is about to break her record for the most Grand Slams. I think at the beginning it's 20. Carrie had the world record for 20 Grand Slams for a woman. So as she's watching this match and this woman's about to beat her record, she's really anxious because she's basically been told her entire life that she is going to be the greatest tennis player of all time by her father. And having been retired for 7 years and then seeing that in her lifetime somebody is about to beat this record, it stirs up so much of her competitiveness. And at 37 years old, her and her father decide that she's going to come out of retirement for the 1995 season of the 4 Grand Slams, and she's going to do one more year and attempt to win all of those Grand Slams so that her total is more than this other woman can potentially beat. At first, Carrie is a very unlikable character, and a part of a lot of all the criticism I've seen in reviews about this book is that people were just saying that she's so whiny, she's too ambitious, and she just needs to step down and let somebody else take the limelight after she's retired. Now, I think we can all say that if this was a man talking about his record being taken over only 7 years after he set it, I mean, you know, a lot of the most famous athletes now, it's taken like 50 years for someone to beat their records, and either they're very, very old or they're not even with us anymore. So you can see why after only like 7 years, Carrie is really like triggered by that, to say that if somebody can beat her record that easily, that quickly, then everything she's ever believed about herself to be the greatest tennis player of all time, male and female, then it's gonna hit her. It's gonna hit her really hard and psychologically damage this worldview that she's had of herself. As you get through the novel as well, Carrie changes so much as a character. You go back from 1994 when they're watching this finale and Carrie and her father decide that she's going to come out of retirement. You go back to when she was born, how she lost her mother really young, how her father never really talked about her mother, never let her have keepsakes of her mother, not even a photo of her mother, how he was just trying so hard to say, it's okay, we can move on, we can just be, you know, work towards our goal of making you the greatest tennis player of all time. And obviously you can start to see how that has psychologically affected her and how she's had to become this really strong, resilient person who does not show emotion. And you see that as she goes through her life, she doesn't know how to outwardly show emotion and feel things other than this competitiveness and this anger towards anybody that threatens her ability to be the greatest tennis player of all time. So on this emotional journey, you find out so much more about Carrie, find out so much more about her father, and not only that, but like the antagonistic force in this book is Nikki Chan, who is the woman who is so close to breaking Carrie's record and who she wants to, you know, play against in the 1995 season, who she wants to prove that even at 37 that she is better than her. And despite that, you get so much of Nikki Chan as well, and how she is such a complicated character in herself, how, you know, there's a lot that she has to come over as well. She's not just a woman in tennis, she is an Asian woman in tennis, and all of the complications, all of the racial stereotypes and hatred that she faces is there too. And you really even love this antagonistic force, and it's just so beautifully written to me, and so thought-provoking and so heartwarming at times, but a lot of the time heartbreaking, that it just hit all the right marks for me. And that's why I'm like 6 out of 5 stars. My favourite book of the year last year was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That won the year for me, and I think Carrie Soto's back is better than The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Okay, come at me if you want to in the comments, that's fine, we all have opinions, but I will stand by that. For me, that book was so much better written, it was so much more thought-provoking, and it was such a digestible read, and really, really heartbreaking. So highly recommend picking up Carrie Soto's back. One of my last reads of the month was Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. If you don't know, this is the second book in a standalone series. The first one was Things We Never Got Over, which followed Knox, and the second book follows his brother Nash. Nash is the chief of police in a small town, and Lena is an old girlfriend of Knox who comes to town to, what we later find out is she's looking for a stolen car because she's works in insurance recovery, sort of investigating any stolen items which have been claimed for insurance. So she's on this mission to find this really old, sort of expensive car, and obviously it means that she's gonna butt heads with the chief of police, who is investigating the person who shot him in the last book. And Lena's missing car follows along the same lines and follows along the same guy who shot him. I wasn't sure how I would feel about this book because it's marketed as like the bad girl, good boy kind of trope, which I rarely ever see. And I wasn't sure how I was going to enjoy this book compared to the first one, and I was really pleasantly surprised. This book was so captivating from the get-go. I was already immersed into the story, and I feel like in a way you're kind of playing fast and loose with the bad girl, good boy trope, while Lena herself isn't what you would normally consider like the good girl in a story. She's not bad either. She's honest, she's genuine, she's kind, she's loving, and she's gone through a lot in her life, so opening up to somebody is really hard for her. She doesn't like anyone touching her either. She doesn't like hugs or any physical contact of all kind, but from the moment that she meets Nash, anytime that he touches her, hugs her, anything, she's just like melting in his arms. So you can already tell they are endgame from the beginning. I rated this book 5 stars because I absolutely loved it. It just kept me captivated from beginning to end. One thing that really did annoy me was sort of Nash's attitude. Like the fact that he goes through this whole, I hate liars, I don't like being kept out of the loop of information, but he's saying that about a woman he's really just met, and she doesn't tell him about her exploration to why she's really there to find this missing car, and that it has something to do with the person who shot him. So he feels like it's a big betrayal that she didn't reveal these details. But he's just met her. It's been like a matter of days, I think, by the point that he finds this out. So he's not entitled to anything, and the fact that he feels he's so entitled to this information just presents quite a bit of a problem for me. But as we get through it, we just sort of understand a little bit more about Nash and his sort of trauma of being kept out of the loop, of having lies being told to him, and it all stems from his relationship with his father, who was, I think he's a drug addict. I don't think he's an alcoholic. I think it's a drug addict. And sort of all the trauma he suffered through all the lies that his father told him when he was young, and promising that he's not gonna have drugs, which of course he does. He always went back to. So you start to understand where he's coming from. But I still felt like at this point, Nash, like, you've got to understand, she does not owe you the truth of anything, and she's not lied, she's just not told you why she's here, and you are not owed that. Like with all Lucy Score books though, when we eventually get there, it's a very slow burn romance. Like, you are quite a way into this book before they even get their first kiss, but it's worth it, and it's so unbelievably hot. You get these spicy scenes and it's just delicious. Another thing that I really loved in this book was just all the insights into Lucian and Sloane's relationship too. So if you don't know, their book is coming in September. I think it's Things We Left Behind is what it's going to be called. And it's just, I'm so excited for them, because I already know that Lucian and Sloane are going to be my favourite couple out of everybody. I'm so obsessed with Lucian already, and we barely know anything about him. You do get more insight into Lucian's background in this, and he's kind of sort of the driving reason why Nash decided to become a police officer, to change the system for his friend and people like him. So you understand a bit more about Lucian, and I'm just so excited for the third book. September cannot come quick enough, I'm telling you. And the very last book I read this month was A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. By the time I finished Things We Hide from the Light, I had one day left to go, so I thought, let's try and get through like a really quick read. And I already have a list of like classic books that I've just never read, and I'm quite ashamed that I've never read them as well. So that was definitely one I wanted to get through this month. So that's what I did. I read it. I rated it 4 stars. It wasn't completely life-altering, life-changing, but I can see why it's so beloved. I can see why it's a classic. It's so well written, as pretty much everything Charles Dickens writes is, because I've read Great Expectations and that was a phenomenal novel. I loved that. And A Christmas Carol is just fantastic. I really loved the story. I really loved the transformation of Scrooge and the journey that he goes on, and yeah, all round it's just a fantastic classic. And if you haven't read it, this is your opportunity to do so, because it's so quick. You can get through it in a day, and if you have an Audible subscription, it's actually free on Audible at the moment, included within the subscription. So highly recommend you go read that. And that was everything I read in February. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment down below what your favourite book is from the list that I read this month. If there's anything you agree or disagree with me on, I'd also like to hear about that. Remember to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to me for more book related content in the future. Bye!